Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ultimus. Again, for this video, there are people sleeping in my house, so if I was a little more quiet, then is ideal. That is why. So, as always, whenever that happens, I like to give you a preface with that one so that you don't think I am not in the mood, irritated, or just not feeling these videos. Couldn't be any more opposite, but just so you know. Cool. Let's jump right in. Welcome to our next installment in the class preview series. We're going over the Druid class today. Druids are one of the most unique classes in all of WoW, if for no other reason than they're the only ones with 4 specs. They have their tank, of course, Resto, caster DPS as a boomkin, and then melee DPS as a feral. They're one of the most versatile and adaptable classes in all of WoW. Depending on no matter what spec you're playing, you kind of have an answer for most situations, which is kind of cool, and it makes them a lot of fun to play and a lot of fun to play with. For whatever reason, I seem to accumulate the most friends that play Druids, specifically Resto, which I'm not complaining as a warrior, but it's just interesting that I seem to accumulate friends that main Druids. But we're going to jump right in, and there's a lot of text on this one, so I'm not going to read all of it. We're going to kind of skip down here and just keep going so we can help keep this video to a decent length. Known for hybrid utility and shape-shifting, Druids have 4 diverse and well-established specializations. In Legion, we're focusing on empowering balanced gameplay, strengthening the cohesion of Guardian abilities and their fantasy themes, and renewing Druid's overall trait of shapeshifting between forms to fulfill distinct functions. Making use of multiple forms for different situations has been difficult for many years, either due to lack of access to the off-spec talents that make your alternate forms feel strong, or because the process itself has felt overwhelming and convoluted. To help solve this issue, we're talking about a new route by replacing Heart of the Wild with a full row of affinity talents, which essentially allow every Druid to choose an off-spec from the remaining 3 specializations. So before we go any further, I'm really curious how this is going to play out specifically, because this is something I think that is going to make Druids unique as opposed to all other classes and specs, even more so than they already are. We've already got it confirmed that all 3 specs are going to be available to play at all times. You're going to have 3 specs to choose from. They're upping the ante from dual spec to tri-spec, with Druids being the exception to 4. But having that whole tier of affinity talents that lets you choose between an off-spec specialization is very, very interesting. So it makes it sound like you're going to have access to that off-spec specialization. So if you're a Boomy and want to off-spec in Resto, or a Feral and want to off-spec in Resto, or a Feral and want to off-spec in Guardian, you're going to be able to, it sounds like you're going to be able to draw from those traits that you would without having to main spec it. Obviously, it won't be as strong as if you were going full-fledged Guardian or Resto and you're playing Feral, but being able to tap into those abilities and some of those resources for defensive, offensive, all that kind of stuff, that's what it sounds like. So that's kind of my interpretation of that. Hopefully that's right, because it sounds kind of fun. Being able to take advantage of that would be just kind of one thing that would just make Druids, give them more of a draw, I think, and drive people to check them out and play them. Affinities provide 2 benefits. First, a passive ability that is useful at all times, even to your main role. Second, access to multiple key abilities to use in associated shape-shifting forms. Okay, so there we go. To give you a sense of how choosing your affinity will impact gameplay regardless of what form you're in, here's a look at the passive abilities they grant. Balance Affinity is an astral influence, increases the range of all spells, abilities, and auto attacks by 5 yards. Interesting. Feral Affinity, Feline Swiftness, increases movement speed by 15%. Guardian Affinity, Thick Hide, reduces all damage taken by 10%. And Restoration Affinity, Ysera's Gift, constantly heals the Druid or allies when the Druid is at full health. That's kind of cool. I feel like if I was playing Feral, which is kind of the one spec that does appeal to me most, Feral and Resto. For Feral, for sure, I feel like either the Guardian or the Restoration Affinity would be super, super handy. Just kind of being a walking, radiating heal for your friends when you're at full health just sounds like a cool concept. And of course, taking less damage is always good. For Resto, the increased range might be nice, or the additional movement speed, I could imagine, or even the reduced damage. I feel like Guardian Affinity is going to be kind of a go-to for PvP. It's kind of baseline or typical, depending. We'll see how that varies depending, obviously, what comp you're playing or playing against. and what talents and relics and artifact weapons look like. But I could see Guardian Affinity just being the go-to default that people tune towards for PvP. Unlike Heart of the Wild, affinities are not temporary buffs. This enhanced access to an off-spec delivered through a cleaner game mechanic empowers druids of any specialization to make interesting situational combat decisions. For balance, the elements that carve, form... Yeah, we read that right. Questioning myself already. The elements that carve form into the universe are fluid forces of nature. Some beings seek to bend the power of these natural elements to their will. Druids, however, worship the protecting spirits of nature. Long ago, nature's equilibrium was thrown out of balance, leaving the world vulnerable to catastrophic events, including the first invasion of the Burning Legion. By leveraging the sacred powers of the moon, the sun, and the stars, balanced druids access arcane and nature magics, made more potent still through shapeshifting when the spellcaster takes the form of the moonkin, to aid in the fight imbalance that threatens the natural order of all things. Gameplay. Balanced druids had a variety of cyclical rotations over the years. The core design problem in all these cycles is that they force players into watching closely for UI cues and casting spells in largely predetermined orders. The Legion design is focused on providing a flexible combat experience where you can use abilities as you'd like, and each has a specific purpose. The Eclipse bar has been completely replaced by an astral power resource, which is built and spent and provides a platform for abilities to create interesting, engaging, and powerful effects. Balanced gameplay will center on maintaining your dots, generating astral power with a mixture of Lunar Strike and Solar Wrath, and spending astral power on either Star Surge or Star Fall. So no more pendulum swinging between lunar and solar power, which will probably be good. I haven't heard too many balanced druids say they like the mechanic at all. I feel like it was a good idea in theory, but in all reality and actuality and actual implementation into the game, it just didn't really work out. So kudos to Blizzard for trying, but also kudos to them for being able to admit that it wasn't quite working out. So we'll see what this looks like actually in game now that they've switched it up. But here's a basic look at the core combat abilities for balanced druids. Moonfire is a 45-yard range instant. A quick beam of lunar light burns an enemy for minor arcane damage and then an additional strong arcane damage over 18 seconds. And it is usable while in bear form. Sunfire is a 45-yard range instant. A quick beam of solar light burns an enemy for minor nature damage and with an additional strong nature damage over 14 seconds to the primary target and all enemies within 5 yards. So when you're popping Sunfire, it's able to turn into a little bit of an AoE as well. I want to remove the autofocus on my webcam. There we go, so we don't get blurry. So pretty much the same basic concept between Moonfire, Sunfire. Both are instant, same range, probably about the same damage, just arcane damage versus nature damage. Dot on the target for strong damage over 14 seconds, except Moonfire's 18 seconds, and then for Sunfire instead it's going to spread to all enemies within 5 yards. So kind of cool, be able to spread some of the love around so you can burn everybody all at once. It's great. Lunar Strike is a 45-yard range, 2.5 second cast, and you call down a strike of lunar energy causing strong arcane damage to the target and minor arcane damage to all other enemies within 5 yards. Generates 15 astral power. Solar Wrath is a 45-yard range, 1.5 second cast, and hurl a ball of solar energy at the target, dealing moderate nature damage, and it generates 9 astral power. So a little bit of a shorter cast, not as strong, but still able to generate that astral power. Star Surge is a 40 astral power, 45-yard range instant. Launch a surge of stellar energy at the target, dealing massive astral damage. Also grants you lunar and solar empowerments, which increases the damage of your next Lunar Strike or Solar Wrath by 30%, respectively. You can accumulate up to 3 of each empowerment, so you can build those up and be able to drop them on your target kind of consecutively, which is kind of cool. Just drop a ton of Star Surges. And Starfall is 60 astral power, 45-yard range, instant. Calls down waves of falling stars that damage enemies at the targeted location, deals strong astral damage over 8 seconds. Enemies in your Starfall take 30% additional damage from your Moonfire and Sunfire. So, kind of cool. Adds that nice little buff to your other abilities while hitting for a ton of damage. Mastery as Starlight increases the damage of Starfall and Star Surge and the effect that empowerments they grant by an additional 30%. So basically a flat buff to your main attacks or your big attacks anyways. I think it would be really cool, and I don't know how well this would work out. They kind of did the same thing with, or something similar with Night Elves in general, but I would like to see kind of a fun buff like for Druids if whenever you're playing at night, or if they would implement like weather stuff, if it's ever like a full moon or something to happen with like the moon in game, you're able to actually get stronger, or your attacks do a little bit more damage. And I know they would never like actually implement that because it could be too much of a balancing issue, but I think it would just be a fun mechanic. Like you're a moonkin or balanced druid, so you're thriving off that solar energy, or you're thriving off of that astral energy, and so as the weather patterns change, or as the day changes and things like that, it would affect your attacks. I just think that'd be a cool mechanic. I'd like to see something like that implemented into the game, but I don't know if Blizzard's feeling that crazy. I know they're changing a lot around, but that might be a little too much too quickly. But it's a cool concept, I think. Additionally, to give you an idea of how some talents may build upon this, here's an example of one of their balance-specific talents. Blessing of the Ancients is an instant. Gain a Blessing of the Ancients, activating or swapping between one of the two following beneficial effects. Blessing of Elune increases astral power generated by Solar Wrath and Lunar Strike by 50%. Blessing of Anshi grants 3 astral power every 2 seconds. So, interesting. It's almost very similar to what I just mentioned without being like reliant on the sun or the moon, but it's, I guess, the same concept of you're gaining access to a blessing based on goddesses of sun or moon. So I guess maybe, I don't know, whatever. I feel like I'm kind of in tune with what they're going for here. Sounds kind of a cool concept, I think. And if you are playing a boomkin and you take that glyph that makes it to where you don't look like a boomkin and you just go into the astral form, you're doing it wrong. You're not a real boomkin. And you have no excuse now coming up with the new high-res boomkin model they got coming out. I think it looks pretty dope. All jokes and opinions aside, boomkin sounds like it could be a lot of fun, and I hope that they get some relevancy, because they tend to go back and forth on whether or not they're relevant and wanted in PvP. They were retardedly OP at the beginning of WoD, and they're still strong right now, but they're not as bad as they used to be, so I feel like they definitely go through waves of ups and downs, and so it'd be cool to see boomkins be able to get a little bit more light for choice. It'd be kind of cool. Feral, the one spec that definitely appeals to me more than any other for druids, I will say, is feral druids also seek to curb imbalance in nature. They observe the fantastic intricacies of the physical world and the delicate fabric in which all living creatures are given purpose. Whether on land or in the sea, in a lush jungle or an uncultivated desert, death is a part of the cycle which sustains life. Nature is an elemental dance between predator and prey. So basically what they're saying is the druids spent some time watching Lion King and completely adapted their play style around it. As a shapeshifter, the feral druid endlessly pursues a greater understanding of this truth. They seek a visceral connection. Visceral? Visceral isn't a word. Whatever. Visceral connection to the wild, and in combat take the form of the deadly feline predator. Feral druids become ferocious, agile stalkers, ripping, biting, and bleeding their enemies dry. The forces of chaos are tamed by the druids' primal fury. Feral druids have a solid gameplay foundation that complements their fiction. Design changes in Legion are tempered, and we're paying the most attention to talent options that provide a wider array of combat customization. Making Savage Roar optional in the talent tree and Warlords worked well to open up gameplay opportunities. We're taking this approach further by flipping it around. Savage Roar is now a talent choice matched by 2 compelling alternatives that cater to different playstyles. Here's a basic look at the core combat abilities for Feral Druids. Shred is a 40 energy melee range instant. Shred the target, causing moderate physical damage to the target, awards 1 combo point. Damage increased by 20% against bleeding targets. While Stealth, Shred does 20% increased damage and has double the chance to critically strike. Rake is a 35 energy melee range instant. Rake the target for minor bleed damage and an additional strong bleed damage over 15 seconds. Reduces the target's movement speed by 50% for 12 seconds, and it awards 1 combo point. While Stealth, Rake will also stun the target for 4 seconds. So, pretty sure that's like your opener, I would imagine. As a Resto Druid, or Resto, as a Feral Druid, Rake would probably be your opener so you can get that stun plus the bleed up. Rip is a 30 energy, 1 to 5 combo points, melee range instant, so one of your finishing moves, it sounds like. Finishing move that causes massive bleed damage over 24 seconds, damage increased per combo point. Ferocious Bite, the most OP ability they have right now in WoD. 25 energy, 1 to 5 combo points, melee range, instant finishing move that causes damage per combo point and consumes up to 25 additional energy to increase damage by up to 100%. Yeah, that's why that hurts. When the target is below 25% health, Ferocious Bite will also refresh the duration of your rip on the target. Critical strike trance doubled against bleeding targets. Holy crap, that is brutal. Ferocious Bite indeed, good lord. No wonder it one-shots people. Omen of Clarity is a passive. Your auto attacks have a chance to reduce the energy cost of your next cat form ability by 100%. Primal Energy is a passive. You gain an additional combo point when you critically strike with a combo generating attack. Damage over time cannot trigger this effect. And your mastery is Razor Claws, increases the damage done by your cat form bleed abilities by 60%. Additionally, to give you an idea of how some talents build upon this, here's an example of one of their feral specific talents. Jagged Wounds is a passive, and your Rip, Rake, and Thrash abilities deal the same damage as normal, but in 33% less time. So it's kind of crazy. So the damage stays the same, but however, with this talent, they're going to deal damage faster. So the damage itself isn't being buffed, but the rate at which it's dished out is kind of increased, and I would imagine that would just get kind of crazy, especially if you're bursting, just boom, 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 drop all those up there, and then just watch them bleed even faster. Because sometimes I feel like as a healer, you kind of get a feel for how long bleeds last on a target, so you know how much time you have more or less. I mean, obviously you're not playing super passive because that's damage, and you don't want to just let your friend just take damage, but with a bleed ticking even faster, that definitely puts the pressure on to keep those heals coming in, and I've seen it happen quite a few times where healers just aren't paying attention to bleeds, plus the damage coming in, it just is overwhelming, and the target goes down without being able to be healed through much, and I feel like this is going to add to that as well. And I like that they're emphasizing the bleed mechanic, or at least that option you're going to have for a play style as a Feral Druid, being able to emphasize just bleeds. I would imagine you're going to get an option for less bleed emphasis, more single target stuff, but it's kind of cool to see, because that's one thing that Warriors and Feral Druids have in common is the bleeds, but definitely I'd almost want to say for a while Warriors excelled at it, and especially Arms. Arms was all about the bleeds, from Ren to Deep Wounds and things like that. But you can definitely see Feral kind of shining right now, at least in the bleeds department. And I know Rogues have some bleeds as well, but I don't think they have as many. They have Rupture, Hemorrhage, maybe Garrote, and that's it. So either way, kind of cool to see that Feral is kind of finding its place with that. Guardian. Like their feral brothers and sisters, Guardian Druids attune themselves to nature through the animal kingdom. They commune with the wild to understand how life perseveres through adversity. They know that the creatures who survive are often those who built to best protect themselves and their kin. In this, the Guardian Druid finds a deep and harmonious value in the steadfast, all while recognizing the sturdiness. That sturdiness requires an aggressive stance when danger comes near. Taking the form of a great bear, the Guardian Druid becomes a massive wall of fur, claw, tooth, and rage. Death Furball. Aided by the forces of nature standing between allies and opposing threats. Gameplay is powerful themes to fuel the Guardian Druid, but the gameplay falls short of delivering on them. In particular, Guardian Druids have had a strong emphasis on avoidance, dodging attacks more than almost any other tank. Which makes sense because they do stack agility. And they don't have a shield to really mitigate stuff, so they have to rely on a lot of that dodge. They do get some armor and bonus armor and things like that, but just flat out just dodge because they're an agility class makes sense. But I feel like now that we have monk tanks, which function pretty heavily on agility and dodging as well, and we're going to have demon hunters, and we're not really sure how all that's going to turn out yet. It's kind of cool that we have now Guardian Druids. How they're going with this is, what we'll see right here is they're going to be just being built on just taking those hits better than anybody else. You know, Warriors block and parry stuff. Death Knights just absorb it and heal through it. We're going to get Guardian Druids that will just take the hit and keep on trucking through. We're going to have, of course, Monks that will focus more on dodging, things like that. And we'll see what Demon Hunter tanks look like, but definitely kind of separating what each tank is going to specialize in, or how they're going to, or I should say how their relationship with taking damage is going to work out. Should be very, very interesting. We want Guardian Druids to survive through their sheer tenacity, thick hide, and massive resilience, and strong regeneration. To this end, we've redesigned several parts of the Druid combat ability toolkit to instead focus on these core defensive ideas: health, armor, mitigation, and regeneration, while de-emphasizing dodge. Makes sense. Here's a basic look at the core combat abilities of the Guardian Druids. Mangle is a melee range instant 6-second cooldown. Mangle the target for strong physical damage, reducing the target's movement speed by 50% for 12 seconds. Deals 20% additional damage against bleeding targets, and it generates 5 rage. Laceration, melee range, instant 3-second cooldown, lacerates the enemy target, dealing moderate bleed damage and an additional moderate bleed damage over 15 seconds. Stacks up to 3 times, and lacerate has a 25% chance to reset the cooldown on Mangle. Thrash is an instant with a 6-second cooldown, strikes all enemy targets within 8 yards, dealing minor bleed damage and applying lacerate for an additional moderate bleed damage over 15 seconds. Interesting. Dealing and applying lacerate. So Thrash has a chance to apply lacerate, even though lacerate is an ability itself. Interesting. So your Thrash has a chance to proc lacerate. You can use lacerate if you want, but also your lacerate, when you use it, has a chance to reset the cooldown on Mangle. And of course, Mangle is going to be your attack you're going to want to use a lot because stuff's already bleeding. Interesting. So they play off each other like that. Okay. Moonfire. Yes, that's where we're at. 40-yard range instant, functions the same way. Minor damage, burn for arcane damage over 12 seconds. Usable while in bear form still, so you don't have to swap out. I remember back in the day you used to have to swap out a bear form to use Moonfire, and over the past couple years they've added it into where you're able to use Moonfire while still in bear form. Defensive. Your defensives are Iron Fur with a 40 rage cost instant. Increases armor by 100% for 6 seconds. Multiple uses of this ability may overlap. So rage bar is 100. You could pop 2 of these bad boys and just take and increase your armor by 200%. So, which is kind of cool. So just that ability to just stack that armor and that mitigation. It's like, sure, you can hit me, but it's not going to do much. So it'd be cool if we got back to a point in WoW where armor value actually mattered. You know, where clothies are going to take more damage, leather workers are going to take a little bit less, mail wearers are going to take a little bit less, and plate wearers are going to take the least amount of damage, at least physically speaking. Magical damage, I know, is a whole different thing entirely. But I would really like to get back to a point where we're seeing armor being a very big factor. And if that means we bring back, you know, some of the mage shields and mage wards and things like that, all those like spell absorb stuff, I'd be okay with that. I like the skill cap on those things, but I don't know if we're moving quite that far back in some of our bringing abilities and game mechanics back. But either way, for druids, for Guardian Druids specifically, being able to just stack that armor is kind of cool. Mark of Ursal is a 40 rage instant, reduces magical damage taken by 30% for 6 seconds. And Frenzied Regeneration is a 10 rage instant, 20-second recharge, 2 charges. Heals you for 100% of all damage taken in the last 6 seconds over 6 seconds. Minimum 5% of maximum health. So very similar to Warriors in that sense. Or actually, no, that was very similar to Deathstrike for Blood Death Knights, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly. So that's interesting. But it looks like Iron Fur is going to be like your major, like big defensive cooldown. Of course, Mark of Ursal is going to be your magic defensive, but just, I mean, if you can keep Iron Fur up, you're going to take like hardly any damage, it seems, which is kind of cool. So it looks like you're going to want to pool your rage into that, as long as obviously you're not letting your threat drop off and stuff like that. I'm curious if we'll see Guardian Druids come back to being the go-to spec and class of choice for flag carrying in BGs. Which would be kind of cool for them. And Mastery is your Nature's Guardian, increases your maximum health and healing received by 40%. Also increases your attack power by 20%. That's kind of intense. So your overall health pool goes up and the healing you receive goes up by 40%. respectively, of course, with mastery from typical gear. Additionally, to give you an idea of how some talents may build upon this, here's an example of one of their Guardian-specific talents. Rend and Tear. Passive, your Lacerate Bleed now also reduces the target's damage done to you and increases damage you do to the target 3% per stack. So that's kind of a cool little ability. We'll see what the rest of the talents look like, obviously, but kind of a cool mechanic there. They take less, or you take less damage from them, and you do more damage to them while you're lacerating them. So it makes sense, right? I mean, they're weaker, they're bleeding out, so they can't really do as much, and they're taking more hits because they can't really glance them off. Cool theme behind it. I can believe it. Works for me. Restoration Druids, one of my favorite people to play with. Resto Shamans and Resto Druids for sure. Two of my favorite healers to just play with, have on my team. I don't know why, I just enjoy them. I find them to be the most versatile and enjoyable to play with. And there's something about like Druid players, they're so chill. I don't know, they're like, They're like just laid back. I just enjoy playing with Resto Druids, not gonna lie. The many gifts provided by nature must sometimes be reciprocated. Restoration Druids seek order in the world by tending directly to its many life forms. Friend to flora and fauna alike, Restoration Druids celebrate birth and growth. I almost said birds. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Where there is decay, they bring rejuvenation. Where there is abatement, they summon regrowth. Life not only needs protection, it needs nourishment. All those puns and just playing on words there. I see what you're doing, Blizzard. I see what you're doing. I'm on to you. To foster this harmony, the Restoration Druid builds a bond with things that grow, gaining inspiration from the flowers' bloom, the seeds sprout, and the mushroom's spores, and the tree's growth. Like nature, the Restoration Druid perseveres through patience and persistence, the foundation upon which all life is built and sustained. They use this power to mend wounds and provide persistent remedies that keep all their allies from falling. Your gameplay is looking like this. Restoration Druid themes are clearly defined, and there's a lot of cohesive flavor to love and how the spec plays. As a result, we're making minimal changes. Their mastery had the most room for improvement. Having basically become a passive effect, we've redesigned it to emphasize layering healing over time effects, favoring more engaging gameplay while also catering to the restoration themes. Here's a basic look at the core combat abilities for Restoration Druids. Mastery, Harmony. That's where that mastery is listed first, actually, when it's typically listed last. Your healing is increased by 12% with mastery from typical gear for each of your restoration heal over time effects on the target. Interesting. So the more hots you have on the target, the more they're going to be healed overall, which probably is going to be an incentive for hard casting some heals, I would imagine. Some of those bigger heals, just being able to proc those. That actually sounds really cool. I like that idea because it encourages you to be on top of and step up your game for making sure those hots don't fall off. I could see that being really cool. Healing Touch is a 2% mana, 40-yard range, 2.5 second cast. Heals a friendly target for a moderate amount. Regrowth, 3.7% mana, 40-yard range, 1.5 second cast. Heals a friendly target for a moderate amount and another minor amount over 12 seconds. Regrowth has a 60% increased chance for a critical strike. Rejuvenation is a 1.9% mana, 40-yard range instant. Heals the target for a moderate amount over 15 seconds. Life Bloom, 2% mana, 40-yard range instant. Heals the target for a moderate amount over 15 seconds. Life Bloom is a 2% mana, 40-yard range instant. Heals the target for a moderate amount over 10 seconds. When Life Bloom expires or is dispelled, the target is instantly healed for a moderate amount. Life Bloom can be active only on one target at a time. So it looks like all of your other hots are obviously able to be put on multiple targets, whereas this Life Bloom is only able to be put on one. And I feel like that's pretty much how it works right now. I might be mistaken, though, because I've never played a Resto Druid like at all. I have a Druid that's like level 22, but it's feral. Sorry, not sorry. So I don't know if... I don't think a lot of these are really being changed all that much. Obviously, except for the mastery. But it all seems pretty standard to what Druids are, at least right now, from my interaction with them. Efflorescence is a 4.3% mana, 40-yard range instant. Grow a healing blossom at the target location, restoring a moderate amount of health to 3 injured allies within 10 yards every 2 seconds for 30 seconds. Only one efflorescence can be placed at a time. Swiftmend is a 1.6% mana, 40-yard range instant. 30-second cooldown, instantly heals the friendly target for a large amount. Interesting. Wild Growth, 7.5% mana, 40-yard range, 1.5-second cast, 10-second cooldown. Heals up to 6 injured allies within 30 yards of the target for a moderate amount over 7 seconds. Healing amount starts high and declines over the duration. Living Seed is a passive. When you critically heal a target with the direct healing portion of Swift Mend, Regrowth, or Healing Touch, you plant a Living Seed on the target. When the target is next attacked, the Living Seed will bloom and heal for 50% of the initial amount healed. That's kind of cool. So it's almost like an absorb, except it's not an absorb. It just reduces the amount you take from that initial attack. And that's already in the game, but I don't think that's changing much at all. That seems pretty standard. Omen of Clarity, passive. Your periodic healing from Life Bloom has a 4% chance to cause you to enter a clear casting state, causing your next regrowth to be free. Additionally, to give you an idea of how some talents may build upon this, here's an example of one of their restoration-specific talents. Flourish is an instant with a 1-minute cooldown. Extend the duration of all your heal over time effects on a friendly target within 60 yards by 10 seconds. So that's kind of cool. So it's able to keep your hots up longer, which might not be a bad idea considering you're looking for capitalization on your mastery, because all your healing in general is just increased by 12% respectively compared to your mastery for each of your hots on the target. So kind of cool. The longer you can keep those up, the more healing you're able to pump into the target, which in turn is going to make your mana management a little bit more efficient. If you're getting, baseline 12% additional heals out of all your casts, I think that's going to offset the mana cost. Simply because, you look at so many other classes, they're getting reworked with different mechanics and resource systems, and you have to wonder how mana is going to hold up with all of this, because it's pretty easy to go if you're not paying attention. And so being able to get more bang for your buck, I think, out of these heals and with the mastery here will be kind of cool, and I think that will give Resto Druid some longevity and able to kind of stay in the fight longer. It also seems like they have the most versatile amount, or the most amount of heals they're able to throw out there, because Holy Paladins didn't have this many. Resto Shamans didn't really have this many. I mean, Shamans are unique in that they have their totems and things like that as well, but as far as just like heals and things to cast and throw around, it seems like Resto Druids are top tier when it comes to having the most options for what to cast to keep their friends alive. Might be wrong, but that's just my observation. So with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you play a Druid, let me know if you are looking forward to some of these changes, what some of these changes mean to you. Is it good, bad? I'm not entirely sure. I'm hoping they're not too bad because I want to play with my Druid friends. But yeah, let me know what you'd like to see coming back, what you hope maybe disappears, things like that. I want to hear what you guys have to say about Druids. If you enjoyed the video, please hit it with a like, a comment, and maybe even subscribe if you enjoyed. And it helps a lot, just letting me know what you guys like. And of course, sharing the video as well if you think it's worth it. But other than that, that is going to draw this video to a close. So, as always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.